I also am delighted and want to thank the Minister, for listening. I raised this here in promised legislation, and so have other colleagues and across party, I think, to try and deal with this situation regarding the credit unions. While it's fitting into the miscellaneous provisional bill, financial, it's important that we deal with the credit unions aspect of it. Arcadia, she is one of my coordinator squad and Gach credit union for the Tira. Every credit union in my county, certainly from Nina down to Carrick-on-Suir and all the towns and many villages and outreaches in the villages, have to be saluted. It's the real spirit of the late Canon Hayes, that we support our communities and of the community and for the community and with the community. And we all know the bad experience that we had with the banking crash. And we see now the bad experience continue with the banks and what they're doing. So this bill is an effort. And as I said, I want to salute the board members, volunteers, the management and staff indeed of all credit unions in Tipperary and throughout the country for the work they do. And I see in Clonmel recently, in fairness, I haven't seen it anywhere else, outside banks, I see where they've erected a lovely shelter along the footpath to allow people that are standing outside because of COVID to have shelter from rain and wind and hail. And I salute them, because I see people standing outside banks, and they don't even want them inside the customers in the banks anymore. But that's the spirit on us. Salute the whole board there, and John Courtney and John Welch and different people that are involved, and thank them, because, and the farmer people as well, for their caring for the people in the community. And I think that's a lovely initiative. And, our pillar banks don't mind if people perish from the rain or wind or from a vulture or whoever else. They've lost the spirit, the reason there is to live. The amendment in the Credit Union Act 1997 to make provision for the holding of certain meetings of credit unions virtually is very, very important. We've all had to change massively from working from home and using of virtual meetings and whatever else. They are difficult and they are challenging. And I support some of the amendments that have been suggested. That's going to be very difficult to allow proxy votes in advance of AGM. So there's technical issues to be worked out. But when I raised this here 2 weeks ago, I raised it in the context of we're very privileged in Clonmel to have a very profitable, very healthy credit union. And there was roughly about 1.7 million to go back into the borrowers and the members' pockets before Christmas, which happens every year. But the fact that they couldn't hold the AGM, this couldn't be done. And Clonmel town and its hinterlands of Fetherton, Newcastle and Finn, and and we have an excellent credit union care as well, and all the Kilsheelan and out into the Nile and Ballymacarbery, those members, that money would have been a godsend not only to them, which they're entitled to, but really a godsend to the business people of those areas who, God knows, have suffered so much this particular year, 2020. It'll never be forgotten. Never be forgotten. We often say near Revelation out of reach about a person, but I think we won't want to bleed like 2020 again. And like it, but the families needed the dividend, because I know the credit union in fairness have offered a loan scheme to the members to kind of borrow to tide them over Christmas, and that's vital, because we cannot have the money lenders and the money sharks and the unscrupulous people. We cannot have them draining the lifeblood out of families at this particular time, because it's so pressurised on parents, for young kids, for Santa Claus, and for every other issue that people are need this time of year. The days are short and the nights are long and it's cold and heating is needed and proper clothing and everything else. So the credit union were always there to help the people and to support the people. As I said, to amend the credit union's institutions Stabilisation Act 2010 to include the European Union as a facility lender, to make provision in relation to certain loan agreements entered into the state with the European Union. And the European Union hasn't really been, and it's shocking that they have showed some solidarity this time. And others mentioned the social contract with the EU, but certainly with the bank crash and the so-called bailout, I called it at the time a clean-out, and I voted against it, because they charged us up to 66% for the interest in their money, where we got it from the ECB for less than 3%, and that was expensive enough. So, where was the solidarity? It wasn't seen. And as I said, I think that, Ireland have about 250,000 active small and medium enterprises. You know them yourself, Lascancola in Chingalov, or Fudden and Tier. They play a very significant role in Ireland's, non-financial business economy and employ about 70% of the workforce here, around 885,000 people. Many of these small businesses, they've got to start from the credit union. The banks wouldn't have faith in them when they had their dream and when they had the initiative to set up a small business and go self-employed and take that plunge maybe from a permanent job. And we need those kind of innovators. We need those leaders. And we need those to be supported. But you'll find that in the vast majority of them, it was the credit union that gave them the law, that had the confidence, because normally the people in the credit union knew the families, and the family's healthy tradition of good relationships with the credit unions. So those businesses and their employees now are being, they're being let down by the government in two very serious ways, I think, Lascancola. And the first one is the $2 billion government credit guarantee loan scheme for businesses administered by the pillar banks, AIB and Bank of Ireland and Ulster Bank. That's failing the people badly. It's not functioning, and the money was meant to be available to SMEs, and it's not. And the way this business liquidity scheme has been operated and administered for thousands of small businesses, they'll be forced to close due to lack of cash flow and its costs of tens of thousands of jobs. And we can't see that. And the credit union, as I said, do offer that space and that viable liquidity and indeed supports when they need it most. And many of those businesses are finding it very difficult to collect their accounts this year because of COVID, because of the confidence that people have lost in it, and people are struggling. And there's a great relationship with these small businesses and the people, and they do always pay, but it's just proving to be extremely difficult this time. And disgracefully, Lascancola, only 3% of the 65 million of the available funding under this scheme has been approved to businesses so far. What is wrong? This is shocking, shocking. And Minister, I hope you'll take this up, and I know you will, because you're a very practical man, and I know your support for the credit unions always, and for small business, and you have an accountancy background, and I've always worked with you in many areas, and I know you will, but that's shocking. The banks are closed to all extents and purposes as regards supporting business. They're doing that, shut. 3% of the funding that's there. Other countries have drawn down copious amounts of the fund, and rightly so. It's there for the fund, and we're entitled to our share. I haven't the percentages today, but we're entitled to our rightful share of that. The scheme must be overhauled, simplified, and remove or reduce the bank's influence from the process, and when to widen it out to include all small and medium businesses. And I see a role here for the credit union. But I see, with the last 10 years really here, more even, a jaundiced eye being thrown at the credit unions by the central bank and the pillar banks. And Michael Noonan, when he used to be here with us, definitely tried to squeeze the lifeblood out of the credit unions and herd them into corners and diminish their ability. Jealousy of the credit unions. And okay, one or two of them made big mistakes. And Clonmel almost was forced to take over one in County Limerick and Charleville. And they didn't. It didn't happen, thank God. But there were problems there. There were problems in a few places. But nothing in relation to the problems that were in the banks. And these were all local, as I said, driven by voluntary boards and everything else. So the scheme should be extended, as I said, to the end of 2021, rather than closing it next June. That scheme, and I think there should be a role for the credit unions. Must be, because the pillar banks are not functioning as far as I'm concerned anyway. And they should never have got this. And I pointed this out when this legislation was being passed here during the year, that they shouldn't have got the pause on this money because they won't deliver it. And have failed to deliver. Only 3% has been drawn down as we near the year end. It's shocking, Minister. As I said, it must be extended out, and the ECB have made an unprecedented 1.5 billion available at rates as low as -1% interest. I repeat it, 1.5 trillion, excuse me. 1.5 trillion, figures I couldn't count or comprehend, and indeed have made it available as low as -1% directly to Eurozone banks, with the aim of helping the economies of the EU and member states. Ireland, in relation to relative terms, represents about 5%, I have the figure here, of the EU economy, but 5% of it. Therefore, using that to give proportionality for the distribution of the 1.5 trillion, that would mean that Irish banks would have access to 9 billion at rates as low as -1% interest to lend and support new low interest rates to Irish businesses and families. What is wrong, Minister? Why aren't we doing our job? Why aren't we availing that money? If the banks are not doing it, which we know they're not, give it to the credit unions, who have always stood up, who have supported the people in Atlantic or Kayla, who have the voluntary and have the interest of the small business at heart in the rural areas. We're wiping out small businesses, and that funding is going there and not even drawn down. So I'd love to see you address that, Minister, because it's shameful. However, when I talk to any small business in Tipperary, and that's what they all tell me, that they cannot get a loan and are crippled with the lack of cash flow due to the pandemic. You know that, Minister, better than I do. Every deputy here knows it. If they were, we know it. And here's that kind of a fund, EU fund there, and 9 billion that we're rightfully entitled to in this country. So what have we got? Kind of a love affair with the EU that we won't. We're the best buys in Europe, and we're the best buys in Europe too as regarding keeping the COVID figures down. Yet we have the most severe restrictions. Business has been wiped out. Mental health, cancer operation, everything else. So here we are. This money is available to take it down. I want to know why it's not been drawn down. And could the credit unions avail of some of this funding, because they can be trusted honourably. As I said, one or two of them did a bit of reckless lending, and they were punished for that. But you can't tar them all with the same brush. And the dividend that is in the Clonmel and other credit unions to be paid back should be allowed to be paid back. So I don't know, was this bill legislation too late, but nonetheless, I compliment you on bringing it in, Minister. I know it's going to the Senate, and I hope it'll get through there, and I hope the President will be able to sign it. Because even if it does go beyond the Christmas period, that we will be able to, people will, if they have to get loans, which is not ideal, but in fairness, the credit unions have offered, they'll be able to have it ended in very early in the new year, because the loan sharks are licking their lips and licking their greasy paws, and they're out there in housing estates and calling the people and literally not intimidating people, but offering gifts of gold, frankincense and myrrh and elected wise men. But they're not wise. But I would advise the wise people to avoid them if at all possible. It's horrific if people are forced into their arms, and it's shocking. So, as I said, Minister, Irish banks are not making the loans available, yet the government continues, I said, to blindly trust the same banks to administer the credit guarantee scheme. And if you were your indulgence, last Concora, I would go back again to the removal of the moratorium from these banks. I have several business people. They're getting phone calls, they're getting letters, they're demands for money, and they haven't the ability. The government have taken away the ability to earn that money and to keep their employees working and to pay their taxes and everything else. So we're just treating them appallingly, and we're treating the banks then with kid gloves and rubbing butter to something. I won't say what I was going to say, but it's shocking. As I said, the impact of the government inactive policy appears to be about protecting the Irish banking sector and not the small businesses. And that's sad, Minister. So the credit unions, as I said, they were the start. They were the lighting spark, the spirit of, as I said, of the Mehel, and the spirit of, as I said, the late, great Canon Hayes, to support small industries, small businesses. And the credit unions were there with them all the way, and still there, and I salute them. It's shameful. It will cost jobs. What is happening to the policies with your and Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, Minister? I don't know, and the Greens here as well. So why can we not think of the Nadine Bioga? I mentioned this morning to the teacher. I don't know if he misunderstood me. With some reference back to my size, my stature. I'm talking about the little people, the people that are the backbone, the shopkeepers, the small contractors, the undertakers, you name it, the painters, the plasterers, whatever. They're out there, as I said, small business people, all the shops in our towns, and they've advanced and changed, and so many of the hairdressers and the nail shops and the beauty salons, they've all mushroomed up. All good people. Maybe had jobs, went into business, and the credit union nearly always helped them out, almost always, because they had to go back. So as I said, this is why is the liquidity from the ECB not being availed of in Ireland? I'm asking you that, Minister, and I want an answer to. And what has the government done to ensure that Irish banks are making the other scheme for small businesses work? Drawn down 3%. If just 90%, I say I wouldn't be happy, but 3% is a shocking figure of funds available. And can you please clarify where your government is allowing this to go on? As I said, Minister. Now, as regards some of the amendments, some of the items in the proposed bill, as I said, I'm interested in being made of the SURE scheme, and that should be there to support families and workers and be availed of as well. And I said, the whole issue of the one man, one vote. We don't want the situation to go back to what happened in the presidential election in America and the court challenges. There will be no court challenges here, but the difficulty for the credit unions to ensure that nearly sacred accountability and representation by the members. They had a vote of one, they got in. No. Nardini Oga freshmen when they were at the age to open the accounts. So one vote, that's a sacrosanct. That must be protected. And also the role then of IFAC, our fiscal body. It's a pity. I'm well aware of in Tipperary we have an IFAC organisation set up by IFA, accountancy firm, so as not to be confused with that. So as I said, why did we ignore it? Take our eye off the ball. How long have we one vacancy in that board? I think this is shameful. Just to show you that you're not concentrating on the credit unions, not concentrating on supporting them. And you've also done in the bill, I see, an effort, it's in section 14, I think, to allow, and I have no comments on the people on it, I don't know their abilities, I'm sure they're good and well-meaning, but one person has served 2 terms, which is confined in the Act, is limited. And you're now asking to approve to allow that person or persons to do a 3rd term. That is dangerous because, as you know, fresh blood, fresh thinking, new thinking. I sit on several boards, voluntary community boards, totally accountable to the state, and we have to have an evolving situation where board members revolve a certain amount of them every year. Good, and it's very onerous maybe to get people, but we have to do it. So as I said, I support Deputy Doherty's amendments as well, regarding that. And as I said, the voting in advance of AGM, that's scary to me, because as you know, these things can be manipulated, and good people and honest people, as you know, would be through this and do it in good faith, but it could be abused, and it could be a process that we don't want to go. So I don't know what's going to happen, Minister, as regards this legislation being passed here and when it's going to be signed through the Senate and signed into law by the President. Will we be able to have virtual AGMs this side of Christmas? I don't think so. The timescale is very severe, and the credit unions to be able to ensure the safety and the democracy and the whole security systems around that. And again, it has been made many times, social housing. We see 56 people, homeless people, died in Dublin to date. And the credit unions have been ready, willing and able. And indeed, we looked at the Sparkles model in Germany, and the way other countries have adapted to help people to get housing loans. We can't get the loans. They're rebuilding Ireland schemes. And I saw this morning where we're waiving legal scrutiny at the Business Committee for Minister O'Brien, the Housing Committee. We're making a lot of noise and a lot of legislation, but we're not building the houses. So the credit union can play a vital role in providing, and have many people, to upgrade their houses and to extend their houses in place. Some of their family members, when they move on and get into a relationship and have kids, the credit unions are there for that. And I don't know, as I said, there's a jaundiced eye always by the central bank, in my opinion anyway, being cast over them, and they're being treated, very harshly. And kind of, when 1 or 2 of them erred, or maybe a few more, we threw the kitchen sink at them. And they were all voluntary boards, but when the banks were reckless, what we saw was appalling, Vista, what happened. We brought in emergency legislation to bail them out, that you and I and our grandchildren and great-grandchildren will be paying back for decades to come. And I voted for it, much to my regret, and I've stood many times in this house, that it was the worst political decision I ever made in my life, because we've got nothing only disdain from them, and nothing only mistreatment of their lenders. As I said, most of the banks I go into now, not saying I work to the staff behind the counter, there's so few of them now. It's robots you meet now and machines, and you don't want customers. They don't want customers outside their doors. But the credit union, as I said in Clonmel, I saw it on Monday, put up a shelter for their members outside the door and the footpath, and to give shelter to them when they're queuing outside at this present time. And the staff inside, I want to salute them again, the staff in Clonmel Credit Union, the Board of Management and the management and everybody that goes in. So please God, I hope that this legislation, thank you for bringing it forward in the Miscellaneous Provisions Bill, financial I hope that it will enable this, and I thank the members of Credit Union and officers and people who spoke to me and other colleagues. This is a reasonable effort. What we should be doing is making legislation to help people, especially in this severe time of lockdown and loneliness and mental health issues and God knows whatever. So we'll be keen to do this if we can, and I wish it a speedy passage here and indeed in Shannon Éireann, and I hope that it will get up to Ars and Oakland and get signed and be enacted into law speedily. Go